20. Bizarre things from the Old West that you have never seen before. Ever heard of a governor wearing boots made of outlaw skin? Or a gunslinger silenced by snoring? The Wild West wasn't just cowboys and shootouts. It was a land of bizarre twists and chilling tales. Forget what you think you know about the Old West. We're diving into 20 spine-tingling true stories, stranger than any Hollywood Western. John Wesley Hardin. They say Hardin boasted about killing 41 men, a number that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but the man definitely had a trigger finger itch. He spent over 15 years behind bars, but even prison couldn't tame this wild man. In 1895, he was gunned down in an El Paso saloon, a fitting end for a life lived on the edge. But the story gets even stranger. Way back in 1877, in Abilene, Kansas, Hardin found himself sharing a hotel with a farmer named Charles Cougar. After a long night of gambling and drinking, a typical Hardin evening, he and Cougar checked into neighboring rooms. Now, picture this. It's the dead of night, and Hardin's jolted awake by a sound so loud it's shaking the walls. Cougar's snoring. Annoyed, Hardin yells for quiet. Nothing. So what does a notorious outlaw do? He grabs his gun and fires several shots through the wall. Poor Cougar didn't even wake up. He was dead before he knew what hit him. George Parrott. Parrott wasn't just any run-of-the-mill bandit. He was a real bad hombre, and his end came swiftly at the hands of an angry mob back in 1881. Hanged, no less. But the story doesn't end there. His body didn't just get buried and forgotten. Enter John Eugene Osborne, a doctor and a politician, quite the multitasker. He got his hands on Parrott's remains, and what did he do? He made himself a pair of boots out of Parrott's skin. Yep, you heard that right. And guess when he debuted this unusual footwear? On his inauguration day as Wyoming's governor. But it gets even weirder. They also fashioned a briefcase from Parrott's skin. Can you imagine carrying that to a business meeting? And poor Parrott's skull? It had a life of its own, becoming a rather eclectic collection of household items. Lillian Heath, Wyoming's very first female doctor, a pioneer in her own right, used it as an ashtray, a doorstop, and even a pencil holder. Osborne and his pal, Thomas Meggie, actually used Parrott's brain to try and figure out if there was some kind of link between his brain and his criminal behavior. Early forensic science was unique, to say the least. Charles Earl Bowles, Black Bart. Black Bart wasn't born in the dusty plains of the Wild West. He hailed from England, arriving in New York with his family back in 1831. He eventually caught gold rush fever and headed west to California in 1849. But instead of striking it, rich panning for gold, he found a different kind of fortune, robbing stagecoaches. Now, Black Bart wasn't just any stagecoach robber. He targeted Wells Fargo, one of the biggest financial institutions of the time. Pretty bold, huh? But what really set him apart was his style. This wasn't some grizzled brute. He was surprisingly courteous, almost gentlemanly in his approach. And his calling card? Poetry. After cleaning out a Wells Fargo stagecoach safe, Black Bart would leave behind a little verse, a literary calling card that made him stand out from other criminals. This wasn't just about the money. It was about making a statement. He was a thief with a flair for the dramatic, a robber with a rhyming problem, so to speak. Over his career, this poetic bandit pulled off 28 robberies, a pretty impressive score. Eventually, he got caught, did some time, and then retired. He faded into obscurity, eventually returning to New York, where he died peacefully in 1917. Fort Griffin. Nestled where Clear Creek meets the mighty Brazos River, Fort Griffin wasn't your typical sleepy frontier town. Oh no, this place was a melting pot, a real Wild West stew, if you will. Cowboys rubbed shoulders with gunslingers, buffalo hunters shared drinks with outlaws, and gamblers tossed dice alongside. Well, let's just say ladies of the night. It was a place where everyone, from honest folk to the most wanted desperados, could find a place, or at least a temporary haven. It earned itself a colorful nickname, Babylon on the Brazos. That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? A wild, untamed place, brimming with a heady mix of excitement, danger, and a whole lot of characters. Some of the biggest names of the Old West passed through Fort Griffin's dusty streets. We're talking about notorious gunslinger John Wesley Hardin, the man who boasted of killing 41 people. Then there's the legendary Doc Holliday, that quick-draw dentist-turned-gunfighter, along with his lady love, Big Nose Kate. These folks weren't just passing through, they were part of the town's vibrant, and sometimes violent, fabric. Elmer McCurdy. Elmer McCurdy was a bank and train robber, a not-so-successful one, it seems. He met his end in a shootout with police in Oklahoma in 1911. Nobody claimed his body. Enter Joseph L. Johnson, the local undertaker, who saw a business opportunity. Instead of a simple burial, he embalmed Elmer, dressed him up like a Wild West outlaw, complete with a rifle, and charged a penny for people to come and gawk. Talk about a morbid sideshow. Years later, two men showed up claiming to be Elmer's long-lost brothers, wanting to give their kin a proper burial. Johnson, probably feeling a little guilty, handed over the body. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, not in the Wild West. Elmer's remains somehow ended up in a traveling carnival, a bizarre, macabre sideshow attraction. Can you imagine? For years, Elmer's mummified body was carted around the country, his final resting place as uncertain as the life he'd lived. Eventually, what remained of him ended up in a Los Angeles warehouse, forgotten and tucked away amongst dusty boxes. It wasn't until 1964 that Elmer's journey finally came to an end. Someone rediscovered his remains. After all those years on display, Elmer finally got a proper burial. Firewater. Firewater wasn't just a catchy name. It described the experience perfectly. This wasn't your average whiskey. This stuff was potent, dangerous, and legendary. Back in the Old West, selling whiskey to Native Americans required a little showmanship. Traders would literally throw the whiskey into a fire. The fact that it wouldn't extinguish proved its high alcohol content. It was a dramatic demonstration of just how strong this stuff was. And strong it was. The recipe was far from refined. We're talking about a concoction of burnt sugar, chewing tobacco, yes, you read that right, and raw, unrefined alcohol. Imagine the flavor. Probably not something you'd want to sip while enjoying a sunset. This whiskey packed a serious punch, capable of flooring even the toughest cowboys and gunslingers. One shot was all it took to understand why they called it firewater. It wasn't just a drink, it was an experience, and not always a pleasant one. It was the Wild West's version of a dangerous game, a game that many played, often with regrettable consequences. Which of these unusual tales shocked you the most, and why? James Miller, Deacon Jim. Deacon Jim was one of the most feared outlaws in the Wild West. Officially, he was charged with killing 14 men, but some whisper the number could be as high as 50. One of his most controversial alleged acts was the murder of Pat Garrett, the legendary lawman who famously shot and killed Billy the Kid. But here's where things get interesting. Despite his bloodthirsty reputation, Deacon Jim was a devout Methodist. He didn't drink or smoke, and he actively participated in church services, even helping the priests. He also had a reputation for being practically invincible. He reportedly survived 4 gunshot wounds to the chest. Turns out, he wore a steel plate under his shirt as makeshift body armor. However, even the toughest outlaws eventually meet their match. Deacon Jim's luck ran out in 1909 when he was hanged for his crimes. His death marked the end of one of the Wild West's most perplexing figures, a killer who also served God, a survivor who ultimately couldn't escape his past. Frank James. We all know Jesse James, the name synonymous with Wild West outlaws, but today we're talking about his brother, Frank James, a man many believe was even more ruthless than Jesse. Together, they formed the infamous James Younger Gang, a bunch of bad hombres responsible for a string of violent bank and train robberies. After Jesse's death in 1882, Frank made a surprising decision. He surrendered. He walked into the Missouri governor's office and, with a sigh, uttered a phrase that perfectly summed up his life of violence and unrest. "I have literally lived in the saddle. I have never known a day of perfect peace." Frank stood trial for his crimes, but he was acquitted. He spent the last 30 years of his life working honest jobs, a far cry from the life he'd previously led. He died peacefully in 1915. Bloody Benders. The Benders, John, his wife Elvira, their daughter Kate, and their son, John Jr., ran an inn in Kansas during the 1870s. Seems innocent enough, right? Wrong. Unexplained disappearances started cropping up in the area, and suspicion, naturally, fell on the Benders. Rumors swirled. Some whispered that the family practiced witchcraft, adding a layer of supernatural dread to an already unsettling situation. But there was no real proof linking them to the disappearances, until neighbors decided to investigate the inn. What they found was horrifying. The basement of the Bender Inn was a macabre burial ground, a secret grave filled with the bodies of several missing individuals. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The Benders, realizing their game was up, vanished without a trace. They disappeared into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of terror and unanswered questions. To this day, nobody knows for sure what happened to the Bloody Benders. Charles Kennedy. We're talking about Charles Kennedy and his rest stop, a place that was anything but restful. It all started around 1870. A weary traveler stopped at Kennedy's roadside rest stop somewhere between Elizabethtown and Taos, New Mexico. The stop was run by Kennedy, a big bearded man, and his wife, Rose, a woman of Ute descent. They had a 5-year-old son, and it was this young boy who unknowingly set the stage for a horrific tragedy. Innocently, the boy revealed a dark secret to the traveler. His father was a murderer, and he was planning to kill him too. Sadly, the child's chilling prophecy came true. Kennedy shot the traveler dead, a cold-blooded act of violence. But he didn't stop there. To ensure his crime remained hidden, he also murdered his own son, silencing the only witness to his evil deed. This wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout his life, Kennedy operated his roadside stop as a trap. He'd lure unsuspecting travelers to his cabin, rob and murder them, and steal their belongings. He left a trail of bodies in his wake, a grim testament to his cruel nature. Mary Catherine Horany. Mary Catherine Horany, better known as Big Nose Kate. Her life was full of unexpected turns and a whole lot of grit. Born into wealth, she lost her parents early in life and was raised by adoptive parents. Life took another turn when she became a widow. She eventually ended up in Texas, where she worked as a dancer and a prostitute. Not uncommon for women in the Wild West. It was in Texas that she met John Henry "Doc" Holliday, a legendary gambler and gunslinger who would later become infamous for his role in the gunfight at the OK Corral alongside Wyatt Earp. Kate and Doc became lovers, and she became deeply involved in his life and his schemes. One of Kate's most daring acts involved helping Doc escape from jail. She set fire to a barn to create a huge distraction, allowing Doc to slip away and avoid a much longer prison sentence. It just shows you that even in the Wild West, there were women who weren't afraid to take risks and help their men, even if those men were notorious outlaws. In the Old West, card players took precautions to ensure their safety. Card games in the Old West were serious business, and safety was paramount. Experienced players always tried to sit with their backs to the wall, giving them a clear view of the entrance. That way, they could see anyone approaching and avoid any unwanted surprises, like, say, a surprise attack. Unfortunately, even the best precautions sometimes fail. In 1876, James Butler Hickok, better known as Wild Bill Hickok, a legendary gunslinger and a man who knew his way around danger, found this out the hard way. He was playing cards at the Nuttall and Mann Saloon No. 10 in Deadwood, South Dakota. Following the safety rules, he sat with his back to the main entrance, seemingly secure. But his killer, Jack McCall, a man driven by revenge, sneaked in through a back door. Wild Bill never saw him coming. McCall shot Hickok in the back of the head, killing one of the most famous figures in Wild West history. It just goes to show you, even in a world where everyone's on the lookout for trouble, sometimes the worst kind of trouble sneaks up on you from behind. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Alice Ivers. Alice arrived in the United States from England in 1865 with her family. After finishing school, she found herself in Colorado, and it was there, amidst the boisterous atmosphere of the region's saloons, that she discovered her talent for poker. Her journey began in a Leadville saloon, coincidentally owned by Bob Ford, the same Bob Ford who famously killed Jesse James. Alice wasn't just a skilled card player, she possessed undeniable charisma. She quickly earned the nickname Poker Alice, captivating audiences with her charm and her impressive poker skills. She knew how to use her allure to her advantage, distracting opponents and drawing huge crowds to the saloons where she played. Her reputation soared when she won a staggering $6,000 in a single night, a massive sum back then. But Alice's story takes a dark turn. She was involved in a deadly incident in one of her own saloons, killing a soldier. This led to her arrest and imprisonment, bringing a tragic end to the career of a woman who'd become a legend in the Old West's gambling halls. Scarves. Think of the Old West, dusty trails, scorching sun, and chilly nights. A simple scarf was a cowboy's best friend. During long cattle drives, it shielded their faces and lungs from dust and grit, protecting them from the breathing problems. The same scarf could also protect their necks from sunburn or provide a little extra warmth on a cold night. Need to grab that steaming pot off the fire? The scarf provided a handy, heat-resistant grip. And here's where it gets interesting. That same scarf could also be used as a quick disguise. A simple adjustment could turn it into a makeshift mask, concealing a robber's identity during a bank heist or stagecoach robbery. Pony Express. Imagine covering over 3,000 miles on horseback. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's exactly what the Pony Express did, and it did it incredibly fast. This fast mail service was a marvel of its time. They managed to deliver mail from Missouri to Sacramento, California, in just 10 days. Running from 1860 to 1861, the Pony Express was all about speed. To make it work, they had a relay system. Riders would switch horses every 10 to 15 miles, ensuring fresh mounts and maintaining speed across its vast route. The Pony Express was a huge success initially, representing a groundbreaking advancement in communication. But its time in the spotlight was short. After just 18 months, it was over. Even though it was efficient and got the mail across the country quickly, the promoters lost a fortune, around $200,000. Why the failure? The telegraph. It proved to be faster, cheaper, and more efficient. The Pony Express, while a remarkable achievement and a brief, exciting chapter in American history, became obsolete almost as quickly as it became famous. Pearl Hart. Pearl Hart, a Canadian woman who traded the familiar for the adventure of the Wild West and ended up making history along the way. Pearl was captivated by the Wild West, her dreams fired up after seeing a Buffalo Bill Wild West show at the age of 17. She packed her bags and headed to Arizona, where her life took a dramatic turn. She teamed up with a man named Joe Boot, and together they pulled off a daring stagecoach robbery in 1899. It was a bold move, but it didn't quite go as planned. They got lost in the unforgiving Arizona desert and were eventually captured. Now, Pearl wasn't just any ordinary criminal. She became a real celebrity, albeit a criminal one, gaining notoriety as only the second woman to attempt a stagecoach robbery and the first to survive to tell the tale. Her arrest was big news. Pearl spent time in jail, but it wasn't a long sentence. Because Arizona prisons didn't have facilities specifically for women at the time, she received a pardon and was released after just 18 months. Camels in the U.S. Army. Now, it might sound strange, but back in 1856, using camels in the Army seemed like a brilliant idea. The military saw how effective camel cavalry was in places like Asia and Africa, and figured, why not give it a try in the deserts of the American West and Southwest? So, they imported 75 camels all the way from the Middle East and set up a base, Camp Verde, in Texas. Initially, the experiment was promising. These camels could handle the long, harsh journeys across the desert, far outperforming horses in those conditions. But things quickly went downhill. Turns out, camels aren't exactly known for their obedience. They were difficult to train, unresponsive to commands, and they had a nasty habit of grumbling and spitting, not exactly ideal traits for a military animal. Then the Civil War broke out, and the whole camel experiment was abandoned. The Army unit was disbanded, and the camels were either sold off to circuses or released into the wild. St. Elmo's Fire. St. Elmo's Fire isn't some kind of mythical creature. It's a real atmospheric phenomenon. It's a glowing light caused by ionization of air during thunderstorms, often seen as a bluish glow around tall objects. Sailors in ancient times saw it as a sign of good luck. But in the Wild West, St. Elmo's Fire took on a different meaning. Imagine this. You're a cowboy out on the plains during a thunderstorm, and suddenly you see this eerie glow on the horns of your cattle or even the ears of your horse. It's a strange, otherworldly sight, and in the dimly lit landscape of the Old West, it would have been truly unnerving. This unexpected light show gave the animals an almost supernatural appearance, capable of scaring even the toughest cowboys and outlaws. It's a reminder that even the most scientifically explainable phenomenon can take on a mysterious, even terrifying aura, especially in the isolated and often superstitious world of the Wild West. Have you ever visited a location mentioned in the video? Share your experience. Scalping. Scalping wasn't invented by white settlers. It originated with various Native American tribes as a way to display power and skill in battle. Unfortunately, this gruesome practice was later adopted by white settlers, becoming a tool of intimidation and a symbol of their dominance over Native Americans. The American Civil War saw some particularly brutal examples of this practice. William Bloody Bill Anderson, a Confederate guerrilla leader, and his men were notorious for their extreme violence. Their actions were marked by cruelty and brutality, and scalping was unfortunately among their horrific acts. Black cowboys. Hollywood often portrays cowboys as all white, but the reality was far more diverse. In fact, it's estimated that as many as 1 in 4 cowboys were black. These black cowboys played vital roles on ranches, doing everything from herding cattle and branding animals to breaking horses and competing in rodeos. They were essential to the ranching industry's success. During the Civil War, many white landowners went off to fight, leaving their ranches in the hands of enslaved people. These enslaved people often managed the entire operation, caring for the herds and running the ranch, gaining invaluable experience and skills in the process. With the end of the war and the abolition of slavery, many of these newly freed men found work as cowboys. It was a chance for independence and a way to make a living. Their contributions were immense, shaping the history of the American West. Yet, their stories are often overlooked in popular culture, a clear distortion of history. Saloons. Saloons were the heart of many frontier towns, places of socializing, gambling, and drinking. But let's be clear, these weren't always the glamorous places portrayed in Hollywood movies. While some later saloons were fancy, with pianos and all the trimmings, many of the early saloons were pretty rough. We're talking flimsy tents or crude wooden structures. And while the movies often showcase the fun side, saloons were also places where violence was common. Gunslingers and other rough characters frequented these establishments, and conflicts often erupted into gunfights. It was a risky place to spend your time. One of the most famous saloons, the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City, Kansas, is still around today. You can visit it as a tourist attraction, but the original Long Branch was destroyed by fire back in 1885. The one you see today is a reconstruction, preserving a piece of that wild history. Women of the Wild West. The Old West was a man's world. In many frontier towns, the ratio was 3 men for every woman. In some places, like California, it was even worse, as much as 9 men to 1 woman. This imbalance created unique opportunities and challenges for women. Saloons, the hubs of social life, often employed women to sing, dance, and simply keep the men company. Their presence livened up the atmosphere, encouraging men to spend their money on drinks and making the saloon more profitable. Now, it's easy to assume that all these women were prostitutes, but that wasn't necessarily the case. While prostitution was certainly a part of life in many saloons, many women held other roles, earning respect and dignity for their work. Their stories are often left untold, yet they were just as much a part of the Wild West as the cowboys and gunslingers we hear so much about. Bounty hunters in the Wild West. To get paid, bounty hunters had to bring their quarry, dead or alive, to the authorities. Now, if your quarry was dead, that meant transporting a body, often over long distances. Not exactly a picnic, just like Clint Eastwood showed us in the good, the bad, and the ugly. But things changed with the arrival of photography. Instead of hauling bodies around, bounty hunters started taking their deceased catches to photographers to get a picture taken as proof. The photographer would carefully prop the body against a wall, ensuring that the picture clearly showed the deceased. This was a much easier way to claim their reward. Geronimo. Born in what is now Arizona, Geronimo dedicated his life to protecting his people's way of life. He led his tribe in countless battles against both the U.S. and Mexican armies, constantly fighting to prevent them from being forced onto reservations. His resistance was legendary. Despite his bravery and his strategic brilliance as a warrior, Geronimo was eventually captured. His story doesn't end there, though. In his later years, he converted to Christianity and even made a living selling handcrafted bows and arrows, along with autographed photos. Geronimo's life is a powerful symbol of the resistance and the forced adaptation that many Native American leaders faced during the expansion of the United States and Mexico. Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull was one of the most important Native American leaders of the 19th century. He was a brave warrior, but he also believed in finding peaceful solutions to conflicts with the encroaching settlers. He was deeply connected to the land and animals, earning the respect of his people. For years, Sitting Bull and his tribe faced the relentless advance of the U.S. and Canadian armies. Eventually, he surrendered and was forced onto a reservation. But his story doesn't end there. He actually spent 4 months working for Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. He performed traditional Native American horseback riding, traveling across North America and even briefly to Europe, but it wasn't a perfect fit. He ultimately left the show, unable to fully reconcile his way of life with the ways of the white settlers. 100 rare vintage photos of North America and the Wild West. In 1906, pioneers perched nonchalantly on a log-laden train as it crept across a fragile wooden bridge spanning the steep ravines of Oregon's Cascade Mountains. These daring scenes capture the rugged ingenuity and resilience of an era driven by exploration and resourcefulness. In 1885, beneath the expansive Nebraska sky, a resilient farming family stands proudly before their humble sod house, a testament to ingenuity on the rugged frontier. Modestly dressed, they embody the spirit of determination. Behind them, a windmill rises, harnessing the prairie winds, a symbol of survival and the enduring partnership between humanity and nature. In 1911, a poignant photograph captures young coal miners in Nanticoke, Pennsylvania. These children, often no older than 8 to 12 years, worked tirelessly as breaker boys, manually removing impurities from coal in facilities that were heavily reliant on labor. In New York City, on January 6, 1915, hundreds of pedestrians gather as they witness the aftermath of a fire under Broadway at West 55th Street. The blaze, ignited by an electrical short circuit at 8 a.m., was contained to 2 subway manholes, as reported by the New York Times the following day. Around 1900, horse-drawn carriages navigated the bustling streets of what was then known as Longacre Square. Just a few years later, in April 1904, this historic location would be renamed Times Square, marking its transformation into a global hub for entertainment and commerce. Courtney's store and post office in Sheep Camp, Alaska, stood as a lifeline for prospectors during the Klondike Gold Rush in 1899. Operated out of a humble canvas tent, this makeshift hub offered essential supplies and a link to the outside world. In 1887, a group of Texas Rangers stands proudly outside a grocery store in Cotulla, Texas. The Texas Rangers, a legendary law enforcement agency with authority across the entire state, became an enduring symbol of the Old West. In 1900, the 12th Street drawbridge in Chicago rises elegantly, allowing ships to pass through as they navigate the waters of Lake Michigan. This impressive feat of engineering symbolizes the city's connection to the Great Lakes and its bustling port life. In 1918, a Texas family stands solemnly in front of their home. Due to the long exposure times of large cameras, smiles were rarely captured, resulting in serious expressions. In 1864, a powerful scene unfolds on Whitehall Street in Atlanta, where a black Union soldier from the United States Colored Troops, enlisted in 1863, pauses in front of a former slave auction house. The sign, "Auction and Sales of Negroes," starkly contrasts the soldier's role in fighting for freedom, serving as a haunting reminder of the nation's painful history. In 1889, a team of 20 mules readied to haul a train of borax wagons and a water tank across the blistering expanse of Death Valley, California. This grueling 165-mile trek to the Mojave Rail Terminal was a lifeline for mining operations in the region. Around 1900, a determined woman stands amidst the biting cold and swirling snow of New York City, tirelessly collecting Christmas donations for the Salvation Army. This global charitable organization, founded in 1865 by Methodist minister William Booth and his wife Catherine Mumford in London, has long been a beacon of hope for those in need. Around 1880, Silver King, Arizona, comes alive as two freight teams, each pulling 4 mule-drawn wagons full of precious ore, traverse the town's main street. The scene reflects the town's bustling mining industry, a lifeline for the region. In 1907, a class of children gathers in front of the one-room schoolhouse in Round Top, Texas, where education was offered in a simple, close-knit setting. In 1910, lumberjacks in Humboldt County, California, pose beside massive sequoia logs. The men appear tiny next to the towering trees, emphasizing the colossal size of the sequoias during the height of the logging era. Before school buses revolutionized transportation, children rode to class in horse-drawn school wagons. This particular wagon, brimming with eager students, made its way to a rural school near Lexington, Kentucky in 1900, a humble yet charming glimpse into early education. Around 1900, a taxidermy shop in Kansas showcases bison heads outside its doors, reflecting a time when the trade of bison hides, leather, and meat flourished during America's westward expansion. For centuries, bison were integral to Native American tribes, offering food, clothing, shelter, and holding deep spiritual meaning. In 1890, the lively St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans was a dynamic blend of cultures. Horse-drawn carriages meandered between grand commercial buildings and stately hotels, while the bustling streets captured the essence of the city's deep-rooted history and vibrant life. During the 1870s and 1880s, Vancouver barracks played a significant role in military operations against Native American tribes in the Northwest. On January 24, 1908, amidst a heavy snowstorm in New York City, horse-drawn carts worked tirelessly to clear the streets, with all snow removal done by hand. In 1862, at Smith Plantation on Port Royal Island, South Carolina, the calloused hands of African Americans skillfully separate cotton fibers, preparing them for the gin. In 1886, a determined pioneer family travels through the endless plains of North Loop, Nebraska, their covered wagon carrying them toward an uncertain future as part of the Great Migration West. Captured around 1897, this photo showcases the Hatfield family of West Virginia, infamous for their bitter feud with the McCoy family of Kentucky. This legendary conflict, which ignited shortly after the Civil War, went on to become a defining tale of American folklore in the late 19th century. In 1890, under the blazing California sun, workers at Stockdale Ranch laboriously stack freshly cut hay into towering piles, marking a grueling day in the fields. The chaos of 1906 enveloped San Francisco as its residents stood powerless amidst destruction. Clutching the few possessions they could salvage, they watched their lives unravel as the relentless flames of the Great Fire, ignited by one of the most catastrophic earthquakes in U.S. history, continued to devour the city. In 1924, at just 18 years old, Ruth Malcolmson's remarkable journey from Miss Philadelphia to Miss America in Atlantic City marked a shining moment in beauty pageant history, showcasing both her grace and determination. In 1889, two imposing overland stagecoach wagons make their way across a bridge en route to Deadwood, South Dakota. As they pass, men raise their hats or wave, creating a snapshot of camaraderie and the rugged spirit of the American frontier. In 1900, a young newsboy hustles to sell his papers on a bustling Saturday afternoon in downtown St. Louis. In Kansas, a family travels in their horse-drawn covered wagon in 1908 with a young boy holding a rifle. At the time, children were taught to hunt and defend their families from an early age. In 1909, in Knoxville, Tennessee, Coca-Cola's journey hits the streets. Two deliverymen, early pioneers of the brand, stand proudly with one of the first Ford delivery trucks, signaling the dawn of a new era. The February 1920 blizzard brought New York to a standstill, yet the markets on West Street, crowded with carriages and wagons, kept the wheels of business turning. In 1906, the vibrant energy of downtown Boston pulses along Washington Street, just north of Temple Place. Carriages weave among streetcars, while pedestrians navigate the crowded sidewalks, passing by stylish stores in the heart of the city. On May 14, 1862, a group of African Americans, their expressions a mix of hope and apprehension, stands in front of a house in Cumberland Landing, Virginia. During the Civil War, Union forces labeled them contrabands, a term initially neutral, yet now carrying deep historical significance. In 1908, Delaware Avenue buzzed with life, cloaked in smoke and steam. The ringing of carriage bells and the hum of streetcars formed an urban melody, while street vendors called out to the crowd, offering their wares. In 1913, young women work long hours in a cotton mill in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, enduring harsh conditions during the peak of the textile industry's growth. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln, distinguished by his top hat, stands at the heart of the battlefield at Antietam in Maryland, flanked by General George B. McClellan, who gazes intently at him, and McClellan's staff. In 1904, Raymond Schuyler poses with 4 of his children on a snowy day in Worcester, Massachusetts, capturing a quiet, intimate moment amidst the winter chill. Circa 1900, a Colorado miner relaxes with his family outside their cabin, with power lines in the background signaling the nearby mine, many of which had already embraced electricity before the 20th century. In 1875, during the westward expansion, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints conducted baptisms of Paiute Indians in Utah, marking a unique moment in religious and cultural history. In 1910, a widow and her children are photographed in West Virginia, shortly after the funeral of their coal miner husband and father. In 1861, daily life unfolds at the camp of the 31st Pennsylvania Infantry, later the 82nd Pennsylvania Infantry, at Queen's Farm near Fort Slocum, Washington, D.C., during the early days of the Civil War. In 1905, under the warm Florida sun, elegantly dressed bathers soak up the leisurely atmosphere of Palm Beach. In 1922, the banks of the Potomac River became the backdrop for a stylish gathering where friends flaunted the latest fashionable swimsuits of the era. In 1925, An immigrant family stands on the docks of Ellis Island, gazing at the New York skyline as they await the ferry that will take them to their new life in the city. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, Ellis Island served as the primary entry point for millions of immigrants arriving in the United States. In 1889, 3 men and their faithful dog sift through the frigid waters of a creek in South Dakota's Black Hills. Their eyes sparkle with hope, inspired by the legends of gold treasures worth $350,000 that were once unearthed in these very hills between 1876 and 1878. Around 1902, a group of cowboys sits around their chuck wagon on the Texas Great Plains, enjoying a hearty breakfast before another long day on the trail. Around 1910, a horse-drawn fire engine races down 72nd Street at Broadway in New York, rushing to combat a fire in the heart of the city. In 1871, a sheep-eater tribe family is captured in their tent camp in the Rocky Mountains of Idaho. Known for hunting wild sheep, which formed the basis of their diet, the sheep-eaters considered Yellowstone their home. Main Street, Pendleton, Oregon. Main Street, Caldwell, Kansas, circa 1900. Broken Bow, Nebraska, circa 1886. Trinidad, Colorado, early 1880s. Main Street in Bannock, Montana, taken between 1865 and 1870. Downtown Wilkson, Washington, circa 1910. Eagle Bar, Western Hotel and Saloon on 15th Street, Cheyenne, Wyoming, circa 1880. Looking down to the Weber River, Echo City, Utah, taken between 1868 and 1870. Kingfisher, Indian Territory, the evening of April 22, 1889. Lake Valley, New Mexico. Street scene in Tucson, Arizona. Pine Street in Abilene, Texas in 1881. Cerro Gordo, California, circa 1870s. Hays, Kansas, taken in 1885. Farnham Street, Omaha, Nebraska, taken between 1862 and 1868. Pack Burrows, Victor Avenue, Victor, Colorado, taken between 1895 and 1899. Blacksmith Shop in Burlington, North Dakota, taken in 1880. Pack train leaving town for the mines, Index, Washington, circa 1911. Freund's Gun Store, Laramie, Wyoming Territory, taken in 1868. Guthrie, Indian Territory, taken on May 18, 1889. Silver City, New Mexico. Front Street, Nome, Alaska, taken on July 1st, 1900. Street scene of early Fort Worth. Main Street and Valley Avenue, Baker City, Oregon, taken in 1875. Drover's Cottage, Ellsworth, Kansas, taken between 1870 and 1872. Fremont, Nebraska in 1867. Main Street, Deadwood, South Dakota, taken in 1877. Virginia City, Montana, circa 1890s. War Eagle Hotel, Idaho City, Idaho. The Cowboy Saloon and the Buffalo Echo Office, Buffalo, Wyoming, circa 1880. West Main Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma Territory, taken on June 18, 1889. Street in Isleta, New Mexico. Amarillo, Texas. Photo taken between 1887 and 1888. The Stage at Sutter Creek, California. Broadway Avenue, Abilene, Kansas, taken in 1875. Tonopah, Nevada, taken in 1903. Central City, Colorado, circa 1864. Hotel and General Store in Wilton, North Dakota, circa 1890s. Cowlitz Avenue, Castle Rock, Washington, circa 1897. Street Scene, Benton, Wyoming Territory. Center Street, Provo, Utah, taken between 1894 and 1905. First house built in Edmond, Oklahoma, taken on December 22, 1890. Tombstone, Arizona. C.S. Fly, photographer. Congress Avenue, Austin, Texas, taken before 1875. French Hotel and Mission, San Luis Obispo, California, circa 1873. Cornucopia, Oregon, taken in 1884. International Hotel, C Street, Virginia City, Nevada, taken between 1860 and 1870. Grand Island, Nebraska, taken in 1867. Gayville, South Dakota, taken in 1877. Street scene of early Bridger, Montana, circa 1900. Pierce, Idaho. Immigrants going through San Angelo, Texas, circa 1885 and 1890. Waldo Store, Waldo, Oregon. Wells, Fargo & Co.'s Express Office, Carson City, Nevada, taken between 1860 and 1870. Main Street, Sacramento, Nebraska, taken in 1879. Dakota Territory Capital, Yankton, taken in South Dakota, 1866. Billings, Montana, circa 1882. Pioche, Nevada, taken in 1873. Poverty Gulch, Cripple Creek, Colorado, circa 1897. Early Street View, Golden Gate, Lawrence County, South Dakota. Helena, Montana, taken in 1874. Elk View Hotel, Elk City, Idaho, circa 1890. The Office Saloon, Battle, Wyoming, taken in 1887. F.B. Severs Cash Store, Okmulgee, Indian Territory, taken on May 9, 1875. El Paso, Texas, circa 1880. Susanville, Oregon. Austin, Nevada, taken in 1868. Chestnut Street, Leadville, Colorado. Vermilion, South Dakota, after the 1881 Missouri River flood. Barron, Washington, circa 1900. Fourth of July, Main Street of Bodie, California, taken in 1880. Drugstore, Dodge City, Kansas, taken between 1875 and 1885. Palisade, Nevada, circa 1870s. Burros loaded with track iron for mines at Silverton, Colorado, taken in September 1887. Main Street, Calico, California. Photo taken before the fire of 1883. Merchants Hotel in Wahpeton, North Dakota, taken between 1880 and 1899. Panamint City, California, taken in 1875. Douglas Avenue, Wichita, Kansas, taken in 1878. Valley City, North Dakota. Front Street, Coupeville, Washington, circa 1890. Main Street, Boise, Idaho, taken in 1866. Bismarck, North Dakota, taken in 1895. Main Street, Payson, Utah, circa 1900. Haley, Idaho, taken in 1884. Perry, Oklahoma Territory, taken on October 3, 1893. Cody, Wyoming, circa 1897. South Temple Street, Salt Lake City, Utah. Mercantile stores in Santa Fe, New Mexico Territory. Corrine, Utah, circa 1870. Charleston, Arizona. Skagway, Alaska. Taken on May 20th, 1898. Street view of Acoma, New Mexico. Taken in 1886. Jerome, Arizona. Shows homes built up side of hill, building under construction in background. Circa 1890. Albuquerque Station, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Circa 1880s. 4th of July, Parade in Yuma, Arizona. Circa 1893. Bluff, Alaska. Parade on Washington Street in Phoenix, Arizona. Sitka, Alaska, circa 1880s and 1890s. Waterfront at Juneau, Alaska. Which of these rare vintage photos of North America and the Wild West left the biggest impression on you? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you loved this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe and share with friends. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.